In this video, I'm going to show you how to find the midpoint of the endpoints of a line segment. What that means is, let's say I have 1 point here and 1 point here. The midpoint of that line segment connecting those 2 points is going to be the point right in the middle. So how would we find this? Well, let's take a look at a coordinate plane. Let's say I had 1 point right here on the coordinate plane, and let's say we labeled that x1, y1. And then we had some other point, let's say down here, for example, and that point I'm going to label as x2, y2. To find the midpoint, which means the point right in the middle, you are essentially just finding the average. So that's what you can think of. Instead of trying to memorize this crazy formula, just remember average. You're going to take the average of the x coordinates and then the average of the y coordinates. And a lot of us already know how to find the average. Let's say we need to find the average of 2 numbers. You simply add those 2 numbers and divide by 2. And that's how we would find the midpoint. So to find the x coordinate of the point right in the middle, you would want to add the 2 x values and divide by 2, and add the 2 y values and divide by 2, which you can see right here in this midpoint formula. Let's go ahead and apply this to a problem. Here it says to find the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints -5, 3, which you can see here on the coordinate plane on the right, and the point 3, -1. So using our formula, I'm going to go ahead and label these points. So this one is x1, y1, and over here in this point we have x2 and y2. As we saw in that formula, the first coordinate, or the x coordinate, is going to be the average of the x coordinates. So that would mean I would need to add the x1 value plus the x2 value and divide by 2. And then take the y1 value and add the y2 value and divide by 2. Notice we are adding these values, we're not subtracting. So we don't want to subtract a negative number. In this case, for the y coordinate, we want to add the negative number because we're adding those 2 coordinates together. We can see that this x coordinate would give me -2 over 2, which is -1. And then finally, +2 over 2, looks like we have +1. So let's go ahead and place that over here on the graph. So -1, 1, we are saying is the midpoint. And sure enough, doesn't that midpoint look like it's right in the middle of those 2 points? And sure enough, it does. If we think about, kind of looking at slopes or looking at the coordinate plane, you can see here from the midpoint, we would go up 2 units and then left 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And then likewise, we should do the same on the other side so that we go down 2 and then right 4. Look at that symmetry. We know we found the midpoint between those 2 endpoints. However, what if we were given 1 endpoint and this time a midpoint? How would we find the other endpoint? So we're going to find the other endpoint of a line segment with endpoint 6, 2, as you can see right here on the coordinate plane, with a midpoint of -2, 0. I'm actually going to walk you through 2 options of how to do a problem like this. First, you can use the formula that I already gave you. So here we have my endpoint is going to be x1, y1, and over here, that is the midpoint. That's what it should come out to equal. There is some random other point that I'm going to label as x2, y2 that I don't know, but that's going to be this other endpoint that I want to find. So this method I call the algebraic method. So we're going to take our x1 value, 6, add the x2 value, that's the value we don't know yet, and divide by 2, and that should get us to the x coordinate of the midpoint, which is -2. I can solve this by multiplying both sides by 2 to get rid of the denominator and subtracting 6. And you can see that the x2 coordinate of the midpoint will be -10. Now, how about for the y coordinate of our midpoint? Well, we can do the same thing algebraically. I'm going to take the y1 value, add this y2 value that I don't know yet, divide by 2, or also known as taking the average of those values, and I should get the y-coordinate of the midpoint, 0. Multiplying both sides by 2 to get rid of the denominator, and then subtracting 2, I can see that the y-coordinate of my other endpoint is going to be -2. Let's take a look at this over here on the graph to see what it would look like graphically. So -10, -2 would be right here. And let's take a look. Does that look like -2, 0 is the midpoint between the point -10, -2, and 6, 2? And sure enough, it does. So this is going to be my answer right here. Now, I did tell you I'm going to show you 2 options for how to do this. Let me show you the second option, and here's a little secret. I kind of like it better, and we're not even using the formula. So let's take a look at what that other method is. So if I have the endpoint at 6, 2 and the midpoint at -2, 0, remember I said on that first problem how I noticed this symmetry, or I looked at the slopes. Let's do that. Let's look at both the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate. So let's look at this point, which is over here at 6, 2. To get to the midpoint of -2, 0, let's just look at the x-coordinate. Well, the x-coordinate here was 6, and to get to this x-coordinate, I had to go from 6 to -2. Well, that means I had to subtract 8. Well, if it's the same symmetry on the other side, that means I want to subtract 8 again, which means I'm going to be at -10 if I subtracted 8 from the x-coordinate again. Now let's do the same thing with the y-coordinate. For the y-coordinate, I went from 2 to 0. It looks like I subtracted 2. So let's do the same thing to get to the midpoint on the end point on the other side. So let's subtract 2 from the y-coordinate, and I would get -2. So my answer is -10, -2. And let me go back real quick to what our answer was here. Sure enough, also -10, -2. And I love this about math when there's more than one way to solve it, and you can be creative and decide what method is the best for you. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, make sure to click subscribe so that you're notified as new videos are posted each week. Thank you so much for watching.